Since its inception in the 1970s, the Star Wars logo has become a pop culture icon, harkening back to that classic struggle between good and evil that's made the series a household name. Nearly half a century later, Star Wars logo has gone through some changes. But overall, that same look originally introduced in the 1970s remains. There's a lengthy and fascinating history behind the Star Wars logo, dating back to those early days when George Lucas was still working on the film that would become known as A New Hope. Over a half-dozen movies later, the franchise has taken a completely different turn from those early years with Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia. And as The Last Jedi looms on the horizon, here are some interesting facts about the Star Wars logo's history over the years. 7 Fascinating facts about the Star Wars logo. 1. The early Star Wars logo was radically different. As Gizmodo points out, the original Star Wars logo was a triangular decal. According to artist Ralph McQuarrie, this version depicted an early male character design. McQuarrie points to Han Solo or Luke Skywalker with a prototype lightsaber design. Not unlike Lucas' previous film American Graffiti, this early production decal was used on film canisters and internal equipment. The film's original title, The Star Wars, appears in a Futura display-esque font. It was a very different look for the movie, to say the least. Image via Pete Vilmur. Gizmodo. Things changed rather quickly as the film's release loomed. By late 1975, 20th Century Fox cut to the giving Star Wars its iconic name. Once the title changed, Lucas and his team decided to rework the logo's entire look. But the pre-production sticker gives fans an insight into Lucas' early vision for the series before shooting began. 2. Some prominent designers worked on the Star Wars logo during A New Hope's various logo designs. Several famous designers hopped on board to help create different renditions for the movie. For instance, designer Dan Perry created one logo that used a vanishing point. This version featured prominently on ads and posters for the film before release, and it was created with the movie's iconic opening crawl in mind, which makes sense, as Perry also developed the opening crawl. He also worked on Raging Bull, designed a logo for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and worked on titles for Taxi Driver. Joe Johnston revised Susie Rice's logo and created the final look we now know today. He later worked with Steven Spielberg on Raiders of the Lost Ark, and directed Honey, I Shrunk the Kids back in the late 80s. So yes, there actually is a link between Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the original Star Wars, interestingly enough. There's also the logo designers who worked on Star Wars adaptations. When Marvel Comics created a comic version of the original film, Stan Lee brought on Jim Novak to convert the logo into a comic book format. Novak went on to work as a letterer for Avengers, Doctor Strange, and Fantastic Four during the 80s, just to name a few, continuing to influence Marvel's most popular titles and logos. Read more. 3. George Lucas wanted the Rice logo to look very fascist. Star Wars logo isn't necessarily fascist in nature. But when A New Hope was in production, Lucas wanted the film to leave potential moviegoers with a lasting impression, and he chose a particularly controversial way to do so. While creating the series' new logo, Lucas turned to Susie Rice and asked her to create a design that looked very fascist. She chose Helvetica Black. The reason, she alleges, a book she read the night before the logos. Date claimed Helvetica had roots to Joseph Goebbels' official Nazi propaganda typeface. Image via Pete Vilmur. Gizmodo. According to Gizmodo, this is only partially true. The Nazis favored sans serif and Gothic fonts, but Helvetica Black's legacy stems far from the Nazi regime itself. The two just appear to come from similar font families, even though Helvetica emerged independently with no connection to Nazi Germany. Still, Nazism certainly influenced the logo, even if Rice's reasoning was slightly off. 4. Uniformity came in later years. When A New Hope was originally released as Star Wars back in the 1970s, several different logos were floating around advertising the film. And that means a huge portion of ads and merchandise didn't use Rice and Johnston's iconic look to promote Star Wars. Image via Pete Vilmur. A 1976 novelization, Ghost, written by Alan Dean Foster, used Helvetica font, bypassing the film's logos altogether. Posters promoting the film before release used Dan Paris' rejected logo with the words Star Wars stretched out, as if the logo was warping out to the distance. And even after Rice's official logo was revised by Johnston, some merchandising products would still use Rice's lettering, while others would take on Johnston's. It would take until the 1980s for Johnston's take on Rice's logo to finally stick, and by the 90s, almost all Star Wars merchandise relied on it one way or another. Until then, various designs and redesigns emerged, defining those early years as slightly disconnected compared to the uniformity we saw later. 5. Solo: A Star Wars Story and other modern logos have historic roots. Han Solo's upcoming spin-off film Solo: A Star Wars Story will arrive in 2018, and like Rogue One, this film's logo uses a frame around the main title to represent its connection to the Star Wars universe. But as it turns out, there's actually a long history of Star Wars titles using a frame, dating all the way back to the first sequel. When The Empire Strikes Back began its marketing run for its 1980 release, ads for the film turned the Star Wars logo into a frame, placing the episode's subtitle in the middle. This was a major first for the Star Wars logo, starting a longer legacy for handling the movie's subtitles. The series' approach to episodes would change over the years. Screen grab via StarWars.com. Screen grab via Star Wars explained YouTube Return of the Jedi put its title underneath Star Wars and gave the film an open border horizontally. That change would eventually continue with The Phantom Menace, leading to episode titles being placed between the word Star and Wars without any border included. This is the case with Disney's The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, which both place their episode titles in between both words. Screen grab via TRA. Screen grab via Star Wars YouTube. But the closed border frame introduced in The Empire Strikes Back returned in recent years with Rogue One, defining the movie as a separate spin-off within the Star Wars universe. And now, Solo will also use the closed frame format, this time with the series' yellow outline color. While the Star Wars logo itself hasn't changed much since the original trilogy, there's a pretty lengthy legacy behind the film's subtitle borders, connecting the Disney trilogy all the way back to those first 3 episodes. Read more. 6. Even in foreign languages, many countries hold on to the original logo. In some film and sci-fi franchises, logos vary widely from country to country. That's not the case with Star Wars. In fact, when The Force Awakens landed in theaters back in 2015, most countries used the words Star Wars right in their title. Comparing trailers across countries reveals the differences. For instance, in France, Spain, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Czech Republic, each logo for The Force Awakens uses the words Star Wars on the top and the bottom, with the episode title translated into the country's native language. So in France, The Force Awakens is called Star Wars La Réveil de la Force, whereas in Spanish, the title reads Star Wars El Despertar de la Fuerza. Screen grab via Disney YouTube. This isn't the case in every country. Russia, China, South Korea, Israel, and Poland all have the Star Wars logo translated. In Russia, for instance, the film's title looks vastly different based on the language's Cyrillic alphabet, with the movie called. While the logo's final designs vary from language to language, this leads to several interesting takes on Johnston's revised logo, leaving many films with long top and short bottom lettering. 7. Fans think the red logo for The Last Jedi is ominous. Star Wars fans around the world immediately noticed that The Last Jedi has a red Star Wars logo, not the classic yellow style. And some speculate that means The Last Jedi will deal with some pretty dark moments. Wired points out that red traditionally symbolizes danger and death in Star Wars. There's a reason Darth Vader, Darth Maul, and Kylo Ren carrying red lightsabers. Even outside the series, red traditionally symbolizes aggression and bloodshedding in storytelling. Screen grab via Disney YouTube. The logo's color change is unsettling in its own right. Abandoning that classic yellow design suggests something serious is about to change with The Last Jedi. Whether it's simply a sign that the First Order is gaining tyrannical power, or something more heartbreaking, Star Wars fans aren't wrong to be concerned. We won't know for certain where the film is heading until it's out in theaters on December 15, 2017.